I can still hear the sound of the jungle at night, the way the darkness seemed to swallow everything whole. My name is Pedro, and I'm an ex-soldier of the Mexican army. The year was 2020, and we were on a mission deep in the heart of the jungle. It was supposed to be a routine reconnaissance, just another day in the field. But nothing about that night was routine. We had been briefed on suspected cartel activity in the area, a simple in and out operation to gather intelligence. Our unit was 10 strong, experienced men who had seen more than their share of combat. We moved through the dense foliage with the precision of a well-oiled machine, every step calculated, every movement silent. "Pedro, do you see anything?" Sergeant Diaz's voice crackled over the radio. He was our leader, a man I respected deeply. "Negative, Sergeant. Just more trees and shadows," I replied, scanning the area through my night vision goggles. The jungle was alive with the sounds of insects and distant animal calls, but there was something else, something that set my teeth on edge. This air felt heavier, the kind of oppressive humidity that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel like a struggle. I could sense the unease in my comrades, a silent tension that spread through our ranks. We were trained to handle fear, but this was different. This was primal. "Stay sharp, everyone," Diaz ordered. "Something's not right." We continued our advance, the jungle growing eerily quiet around us. It was as if the very earth was holding its breath. Then we heard it. A low growl, almost imperceptible, but enough to send a chill down my spine. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "Form up, defensive positions," Diaz commanded, and we quickly moved into a tight circle, weapons aimed outward. My heart was pounding in my chest, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I could see the fear in the eyes of my comrades, but also the determination. We were soldiers, and we were prepared to fight. Out of the darkness it came, a blur of movement, faster than anything I'd ever seen, the Nahual. It was unlike any creature had ever encountered, part man, part beast, with eyes that glowed with a malevolent light. It moved with an unnatural speed, and before we could react, it was upon us. The first to fall was Private Hernandez. His scream was cut short as the creature's claws tore through his flesh. Blood sprayed, and the night erupted into chaos. We opened fire, the sound of gunfire shattering the silence, but the Nahual was too fast, darting in and out of our line of sight, picking us off one by one. I felt a searing pain as its claws raked across my chest, knocking me to the ground. My vision blurred, and I could hear the screams of my comrades, the growl of the creature, and then darkness. I woke up in a military hospital, my body wrapped in bandages, my mind a haze of pain and confusion. They told me I was the only survivor. My injuries were severe, broken ribs, deep lacerations, and a concussion that left me in a coma for 2 weeks. But I survived, and I remembered. The official story was that we were ambushed by a heavily armed gang. But I knew the truth. We had encountered the Nahual, and it had slaughtered my friends. The higher-ups ordered us to keep silent about what really happened. National security, they said, but I could see the fear in their eyes. They knew there were things out there that defied explanation, things that could not be contained or controlled. Years passed, but the nightmares never left me. Every night I relived that mission, the growl of the Nahual, the screams of my comrades, the pain of its claws. I tried to move on, to live a normal life, but the memories haunted me. I drank to numb the pain, but it never worked for long. The Nahual was always there, lurking in the shadows of my mind. One night I received a call from an old friend, Carlos, who had been part of another unit. "Pedro, I need to talk to you. It's about the Nahual." Carlos and I met in a small, dimly lit bar on the outskirts of the city. He looked as haunted as I felt, his eyes sunken and dark circles under them. We ordered our drinks in silence, the weight of what we were about to discuss hanging heavily in the air. The bartender eyed us warily, as if sensing the gravity of our conversation. "Pedro," Carlos began, his voice low and steady, "I found something. Other soldiers, other encounters. It's not just us." He slid a folder across the table, its edges worn from handling. I opened it with trembling hands, my eyes scanning the documents within. Reports of encounters with creatures like the Nahual, soldiers who had seen things that defied explanation. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I read account after account of supernatural horrors. "It's happening all over the world," Carlos continued. "Different names, different places, but the same story. Soldiers encountering entities that shouldn't exist." My mind raced as I processed the information. "Why haven't we heard about this before? Why is it being covered up?" "Because it's easier to explain away as criminal activity or accidents," Carlos said bitterly. "Admitting the truth would cause panic. The governments are keeping it quiet, sweeping it under the rug." I felt a surge of anger and frustration. "We can't just sit by and do nothing, Carlos. We need to do something about this." "That's why I called you," Carlos replied, a spark of determination in his eyes. "I can't do this alone. We need to find others like us, people who know the truth and are willing to fight back." Over the next few months, Carlos and I worked tirelessly to track down other survivors, soldiers who had encountered the supernatural and lived to tell the tale. It wasn't easy. Most were reluctant to talk, still haunted by their experiences and afraid of the consequences. But slowly our group grew. We called ourselves the Hunters. Our mission was simple: to track down and eliminate these supernatural threats, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. It was dangerous work, but it gave us a purpose, a reason to keep going. Our first mission as the Hunters took us deep into the mountains of northern Mexico. There had been reports of strange disappearances in a small village, and the locals were convinced that something sinister was at work. We arrived under the cover of darkness, our weapons ready, our nerves on edge. As we moved through the village, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The houses were dark, the streets eerily silent. We split into two teams, Carlos leading one and me the other. My team consisted of 3 other ex-soldiers: Javier, a sharp shooter with a steady hand; Elena, a medic who could patch up any wound; and Miguel, a tech expert who handled our communications and surveillance. "Stay sharp," I whispered, my eyes scanning the shadows. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet." We moved cautiously, checking each house and alleyway. The villagers had taken refuge in the local church, their fear palpable. Father Tomas, the village priest, met us at the door, his face etched with worry. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice trembling. "It's been like this for weeks. People disappearing, strange noises at night. We're all terrified." "Have you seen anything, Father?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm and reassuring. "No, but I've heard things. Growls, like an animal, but different. And shadows, moving in the dark." I nodded, glancing at my team. "We'll take a look around. Stay inside and keep the doors locked." As we moved through the village, the sense of unease grew stronger. We followed the sounds of growls and whispers, the air thick with tension. Suddenly, a shadow darted across the street, too fast to be human. "There!" Javier shouted, raising his rifle. We gave chase, our footsteps echoing in the silence. The shadow led us to the edge of the village, where the forest loomed dark and menacing. We hesitated for a moment, then plunged into the trees, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The growls grew louder, more menacing. I felt a chill run down my spine as we reached a clearing. In the center stood a figure shrouded in darkness, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Spread out," I ordered, my heart pouncing. "Stay alert." We moved to surround the figure, our weapons aimed and ready. As we closed in, it let out a bone-chilling roar and lunged at us, moving with an inhuman speed. The clearing erupted into chaos as the creature lunged at us. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, a twisted amalgamation of human and beast. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its claws glinted in the moonlight as it slashed at us. We opened fire, the deafening sound of gunfire shattering the silence of the night. "Fall back," I shouted, trying to keep my team together. "Spread out and keep it in sight." Javier, our sharpshooter, took a position behind a fallen log, his rifle trained, on the creature. Elena, our medic, stayed close to me, her eyes wide with fear but her hands steady on her weapon. Miguel, our tech expert, was frantically trying to adjust our communication frequencies to call for backup, but the forest seemed to swallow our signals. The creature moved with unnerving speed, darting between trees and disappearing into the shadows, only to reappear moments later. It seemed to toy with us, testing our resolve, taunting us with its inhuman agility. "We can't let it get away." Carlos's voice crackled over the radio. He and his team were somewhere in the opposite direction, facing their own challenges. "We need a plan," I said, scanning the area for any sign of the creature. "Keep it in the open," Javier suggested. "Don't let it retreat into the darkness." Elena nodded, her expression determined. "If we can keep it in sight, we can bring it down." We moved cautiously, our backs against each other, eyes scanning the trees. The forest seemed alive with movement, shadows dancing on the edge of our vision. I could feel the tension in the air, a palpable sense of danger that seemed to grow with every passing moment. Suddenly, Miguel's voice cut through the chaos. "I've got movement to the left." We turned as one, weapons raised. The creature emerged from the trees, its eyes fixed on us with an unsettling intelligence. It let out another roar, its teeth bared in a grotesque grin. "Fire!" I shouted, and we unleashed a barrage of gunfire. Bullets tore through the air, hitting trees and ground, but the creature seemed unfazed. It moved with a grace that defied its monstrous appearance, evading our shots with ease. "Reload!" I yelled, ducking behind a tree for cover. The creature was closing in, its growls growing louder with each step. I could feel its presence, a dark shadow that seemed to suffocate the air around us. As I reloaded my rifle, I caught a glimpse of movement to my left. Javier was taking aim, his finger tightening on the trigger. The creature lunged at him, claws slashing through the air. "Javier!" Elena screamed, but it was too late. The creature knocked him to the ground with a sickening thud. I saw blood seeping through his uniform, staining the forest floor. "No!" I shouted, my heart pounding with fury. I fired round after round at the creature, my vision blurred with rage and despair. It was a blur of motion, chaos and desperation, blending together in a symphony of violence. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature vanished into the darkness. The forest fell silent once more, the only sound the ragged breaths of my team and the distant cries of nocturnal animals. "We need to get Javier out of here," Elena said, her voice trembling. I nodded, my hands shaking as I checked Javier's pulse. He was unconscious, but alive. "Miguel, see if you can reach Carlos. Tell him we need immediate extraction." Miguel nodded, fingers flying over the radio. "Carlos, come in. We've encountered the creature. We need backup now." There was static, then Carlos's voice broke through. "Copy that. We're on our way." We gathered around Javier, doing what we could to stabilize him while we waited for backup. The night seemed endless, the minutes stretching into eternity as we listened for any sign of movement in the forest. "He's lost a lot of blood," Elena said quietly, her hands deftly applying pressure to Javier's wound. "We need to get him to a hospital." "I know," I replied, my voice thick with guilt. Javier had been a good soldier, a loyal friend. I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. Minutes passed like hours, each one filled with a tense anticipation. Finally, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the silence. Carlos and his team emerged from the trees, their faces grim but determined. "We're here," Carlos said, kneeling beside us. "What's the situation?" "We encountered the creature," I explained, my voice hoarse. "It attacked us. Javier got hit. We managed to drive it off, but—" Carlos nodded, his jaw clenched. "We need to move quickly. Miguel, get a stretcher ready. We'll carry Javier back to the rendezvous point." With practiced efficiency, we loaded Javier onto the stretcher and began the trek back through the forest. The air was thick with tension, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling of failure, of letting my team down. As we walked, the forest seemed to close in around us, the shadows taking on a life of their own. I could feel eyes watching us from the darkness, a silent audience to our struggles. "We're almost there," Carlos said, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of emotions. "Stay focused." We reached the rendezvous point without further incident. The extraction team was waiting for us, their faces masked in shadow beneath their helmets. They quickly loaded Javier onto a waiting helicopter, the roar of its engines drowning out the sounds of the forest. "We'll take it from here," one of the soldiers said, his voice muffled through the radio. I nodded, my throat tight with unspoken emotions. "Take care of him." As the helicopter rose into the night sky, I watched until it disappeared from view. Javier was in good hands now, but the mission was far from over. The creature was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next opportunity to strike. "We need to find it," I said quietly, more to myself than anyone else. "We will," Carlos replied, his voice firm. "We won't rest until we do." And so we regrouped, our resolve hardened by the events of that night. The hunt for the Nahual continued, our determination a shield against the darkness that threatened to consume us all. The days blurred into weeks as we searched for any trace of the Nahual. Our group of hunters expanded, drawing in more survivors and believers from around the world. Each new member brought with them tales of encounters with supernatural entities, each story more chilling than the last. We set up a makeshift headquarters in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It became our base of operations, a place where we could plan our next moves and share information. Maps covered the walls, marked with sightings and potential hotspots. Carlos took charge of coordinating our efforts, his leadership steady and unwavering. He had a gift for strategy, for seeing the bigger picture amidst the chaos. I admired him for that, for his ability to keep us focused when everything seemed to be falling apart. "Any new leads?" I asked one morning, entering the warehouse to find Carlos poring over a stack of reports. He looked up, exhaustion etched into the lines of his face. "Nothing concrete yet. The creature seems to move unpredictably, appearing in one place and then disappearing without a trace." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It's like trying to catch smoke." "We'll find it," Carlos said firmly, his gaze meeting mine. "We have to." The days turned into nights as we scoured the city and its outskirts, following every lead and chasing every shadow. The Nahual remained elusive, a ghost in the darkness that seemed to mock our efforts. "It's playing with us," Miguel muttered one evening, frustration evident in his voice. "Like a cat with a mouse." "We can't give up," Elena said, her voice steady despite the weariness in her eyes. "Too many lives are at stake." I nodded, my jaw clenched with determination. We had come too far to turn back now. The Nahual had taken so much from us, friends, comrades, our sense of security. We couldn't let it continue to prey on innocent lives. One night, as we were preparing to call it quits, a breakthrough came. Miguel intercepted a transmission from a Ramatsi village on the outskirts of the city. Reports of strange sightings and unexplained disappearances had flooded in, and the villagers were living in fear. "We have to check it out," Carlos said, his eyes shining with renewed hope. I nodded, my heart racing with anticipation. "Let's gear up. We leave at first light." The journey to the remote village was fraught with tension. We traveled in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. The reports Miguel had intercepted were troubling, people vanishing without a trace, strange noises echoing through the night, a sense of unease that hung heavy in the air. As we approached the village, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. The buildings were run down, the streets deserted. It was as if the very life had been drained from the place. "Something isn't right here," Elena whispered, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "I agree," Carlos replied, his hand resting on the hilt of his knife. "Stay close." We moved cautiously through the village, our senses on high alert. The air was thick with the smell of decay and neglect. Windows were boarded up, doors hung on their hinges. It was as if the villagers had fled in the dead of night, leaving behind a ghost town. "Over there," Miguel said suddenly, pointing towards a small cottage at the edge of the village. We approached the cottage cautiously, weapons raised. The door was ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. Carlos motioned for us to spread out, covering all possible exits. "Be ready for anything," he warned, his voice low. With a nod, I took a deep breath and kicked open the door. The cottage was dark and musty, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth. We moved through the rooms methodically, searching for any sign of life. The furniture was overturned, belongings scattered on the floor as if someone had left in a hurry. But there was no sign of the creature or any of the villagers. "Clear," I called out quietly, my voice echoing in the empty cottage. Carlos nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Check the rest of the buildings. We need to gather as much information as we can." We spent hours combing through the village, searching every building for clues. Most were abandoned, the few remaining belongings left behind telling a story of fear and desperation. It was clear that whatever had happened here had driven the villagers away. As night began to fall, we regrouped in the center of the village. The air grew colder, a chill wind whispering through the empty streets. "No sign of the Nahual," Miguel said, frustration evident in his voice. "Or the villagers," Elena added, her expression troubled. Carlos paced back and forth, his mind racing. "There has to be something we're missing." The reports were clear. People saw something, heard something. I frowned, my thoughts racing. What if it's hiding underground in the caves or tunnels? "It's possible," Carlos said slowly. "There are caves nearby, old mining tunnels. They could provide shelter." "Then that's where we'll go," I said firmly. "Tonight." We gathered our gear and made our way towards the caves on the outskirts of the village. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. The caves loomed ahead of us, dark and foreboding. "Stay close," Carlos ordered, leading the way with a flashlight in hand. The entrance to the caves was narrow, barely wide enough for one person to pass through at a time. The air inside was damp and cold, the sound of dripping water echoing off the walls. We moved deeper into the darkness, our footsteps echoing in the silence. "Keep your eyes peeled," Carlos whispered, his voice barely audible. The tunnels twisted and turned, branching off into smaller passages that seemed to lead nowhere. The walls were slick with moisture, the ground uneven beneath our boots. I could feel the weight of the earth pressing down on us, a suffocating reminder of our vulnerability. Suddenly, Miguel stopped short, his hand gripping my arm tightly. "Did you hear that?" We froze, straining our ears for any sign of movement. There it was again, a soft, echoing growl that seemed to come from all around us. "It's close," Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. We moved cautiously through the tunnels, following the sound of the growls. The air grew thicker with each step, a sense of dread settling over us like a shroud. I gripped my rifle tighter, my heart pounding in my chest. And then we saw it, a pair of glowing eyes in the darkness, watching us with a predatory intensity. The Nahual emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and twisting as if it were made of smoke and shadow. "Fire!" Carlos shouted, and we opened fire with everything we had. Bullets tore through the air, hitting the creature's form with a sickening thud. It let out a blood-curdling roar, lashing out with its claws. We dodged and weaved, narrowly avoiding its attacks. Javier fired a well-aimed shot that grazed the creature's shoulder, causing it to recoil momentarily. Taking advantage of the opening, Carlos lunged forward with his knife, slashing at its side. The Nahual howled in pain, retreating further into the darkness. We pursued, determined not to let it escape this time. The tunnels echoed with the sounds of our struggle, a symphony of gunfire and growls, but just as quickly as it had appeared, the Nahual vanished into the depths of the cave. We stood panting, chests heaving with exertion, adrenaline still coursing through our veins. "We have to finish this," I said, my voice hoarse with determination. Carlos nodded, his eyes blazing with resolve. "Let's go." With renewed purpose, we plunged deeper into the cave, following the trail of blood left by the wounded creature. The tunnels seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning like a labyrinth. And then we found it, the creature cornered in a small chamber at the end of a narrow passage. It turned to face us, its eyes burning with hatred and defiance. "This ends now," Carlos said, his voice cold and unyielding. The Nahual lunged at us with renewed ferocity, but we were ready. We fought with everything we had, a dance of death and survival in the depths of the earth. Claws slashed, bullets flew, and in the end, it was a combined effort that brought the creature down. I watched as Carlos delivered the final blow, his knife sinking deep into the Nahual's chest. The creature let out a final, agonized cry before collapsing to the ground, its form dissolving into shadows and smoke. As the creature dissolved before us, the air seemed to shift, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from our shoulders. We stood, in silence, catching our breaths, disbelief mingling with relief. "We did it," Miguel said finally, his voice filled with awe. Carlos nodded, his expression grave. "But at what cost?" We turned to survey the aftermath. The cave was littered with debris and blood, a testament to the fierce battle that had taken place. I felt a pang of sorrow for all those who had fallen victim to the Nahual, whose lives had been snuffed out by its malevolent presence. "We need to report back," Elena said quietly, breaking the somber silence. "Let them know it's over." I nodded, my mind already racing with the implications of our discovery. The Nahual was real, a creature of darkness and nightmares that had haunted us for so long. But now that it was defeated, what would become of us? Would we be hailed as heroes or condemned as madmen? "We should gather evidence," Carlos said, his voice cutting through my thoughts. "Proof of what we've seen." Together, we photographed the scene, documenting the creature's remains and the cave where it had made its lair. It was important to have something tangible to show the authorities, to prove that our ordeal had not been in vain. As we made our way back to the village, the weight of exhaustion settled over us. The adrenaline that had sustained us through the battle began to ebb, leaving us drained and weary. "We need to rest," Miguel said, voicing what we were all thinking. Carlos nodded in agreement. "Agreed. Let's head back to the warehouse. We can regroup there." The journey back to our makeshift headquarters was a blur of fatigue and introspection. The events of the past days had taken their toll, leaving us shaken and raw. But amidst the weariness, there was also a sense of accomplishment, a belief that we had done something important, something that mattered. When we finally reached the warehouse, we collapsed onto makeshift beds and chairs, too exhausted to do anything but rest. The night passed in fitful sleep, haunted by dreams of shadows and claws. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the sunlight streaming through the dusty windows of the warehouse. We gathered around a makeshift table, cups of strong coffee in hand, to discuss our next steps. "We need to make a full report," Carlos said, his voice steady despite the weariness in his eyes. "To our superiors, to the authorities." "And what about the villagers?" Elena asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "They deserve to know the truth," Carlos nodded thoughtfully. "We'll have to tread carefully. Not everyone will believe what we've seen." "But we have evidence," Miguel interjected, gesturing towards the photographs we had taken. "We can't ignore what happened." I agreed with Miguel. We couldn't let our discovery be swept under the rug, buried in secrecy like so many others before us. The world needed to know about the Nahual, about the dangers that lurked in the shadows. "We owe it to those who didn't make it," I said quietly, my voice firm with resolve, "to tell their story." And so, we began the process of compiling our report. We included everything: the sightings, the encounters, the battle in the caves. It was a comprehensive account of our ordeal, a testament to our courage and determination. As we worked, word spread through the underground network of hunters. More survivors came forward with their own stories of supernatural encounters, each one adding weight to our cause. It became clear that our fight was far from over, that there were others out there who needed our help, but amidst the chaos and uncertainty, there was also hope. Hope that our efforts would make a difference, that we could shine a light into the darkness and expose the truth. "We've come a long way," Carlos said one evening, as we sat around a crackling fire in the warehouse, "but there's still much to do." I nodded, my thoughts drifting to the future. The Nahual was just the beginning, a glimpse into a world of mysteries and dangers that we were only beginning to understand. But with each step we took, each battle we fought, we grew stronger. And as long as there were shadows to explore and mysteries to unravel, we would be there, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. The aftermath of our encounter with the Nahual left us grappling with a mix of emotions: relief, exhaustion, and a lingering sense of unease. We knew our mission wasn't over. There were still unanswered questions, loose ends that needed tying, and a world that needed to know the truth. After compiling our report and sending it to our superiors, we awaited their response with bated breath. Days turned into weeks as we continued to gather information and support from other hunters who had encountered similar phenomena. The network grew stronger, our resolve hardened by our shared experiences. One evening, as we sat around the warehouse planning our next move, Carlos received a call from headquarters. His face grew tense as he listened, his brow furrowed with concentration. "What is it?" I asked quietly, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Carlos hung up the phone and turned to face us. "They want us to meet with a special task force." "A task force?" Miguel echoed, his eyes widening with surprise. "For what?" Carlos hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "They believe our encounter with the Nahual is part of a larger pattern. There have been reports from other regions, similar sightings, similar incidents." "So, we're not alone," Eleanor said softly, her voice tinged with relief. Carlos nodded. "It seems this creature, or creatures, may be more widespread than we initially thought. The task force wants us to join them, to share our expertise and help track down these entities." I felt a surge of mixed emotions, pride that our efforts were being recognized, apprehension at the thought of facing more unknown dangers, but above all there was a sense of purpose, a belief that we were on the brink of something important. "When do we leave?" I asked, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "Tomorrow," Carlos replied. "They're sending a transport to pick us up. We'll be briefed on the way." And so the next day dawned with a sense of urgency. We packed our gear, said goodbye to our makeshift headquarters, and boarded the transport that would take us to our next destination. The journey was filled with a tense anticipation, each of us lost in our own thoughts. As we flew towards our destination, Carlos briefed us on what little information headquarters had shared. The task force was made up of experts from various fields: scientists, military strategists, and paranormal investigators. Their goal was simple: to uncover the truth behind these supernatural phenomena and, if possible, neutralize the threats they posed. "It won't be easy," Carlos warned, his voice grave, "but we've faced worse together." We nodded in agreement, our determination unwavering. Whatever lay ahead, we were ready to face it head-on. The transport landed at a remote military base, where we were ushered into a secure briefing room. "Welcome," a stern-faced officer greeted us. "I'm General Ramirez. You've been chosen to join Task Force X." Task Force X, the name sent a chill down my spine. It was clear this wasn't just another mission. We were stepping into a world of secrets and shadows, where the line between reality and myth blurred. The briefing was thorough and unsettling. Reports of supernatural occurrences had been increasing worldwide, from sightings of cryptids to inexplicable phenomena that defied scientific explanation. The Nahual was just one piece of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle that threatened the very fabric of our world. "Our mission is twofold," General Ramirez continued, "to investigate these phenomena and, if possible, to contain or eliminate them. Your experience with the Nahual makes you invaluable to this task force." We listened intently as he outlined our objectives and the challenges we would face. The stakes were high, failure was not an option, but as the briefing drew to a close, a sense of purpose settled over us. "We leave at first light," General Ramirez concluded. "Gear up and get some rest. Tomorrow we begin." The morning came with a quiet intensity, the air thick with anticipation as we geared up for our first mission with Task Force X. We were joined by a diverse group of specialists, each bringing their own expertise to the table: scientists, occult researchers, and seasoned military operatives. As we gathered in the briefing room, General Ramirez outlined our first assignment: investigate a series of mysterious disappearances in a remote mountain region. Witnesses reported strange lights and eerie sounds emanating from the woods, prompting fears of supernatural involvement. "We'll split into teams and cover different sectors of the area," General Ramirez explained, pointing to a map projected on the screen. "Stay alert and report any unusual activity immediately." We nodded in understanding, our resolve firm as we prepared to venture into the unknown once more. The journey to the mountain region was uneventful, the landscape rugged and untouched by civilization. The air grew cooler as we approached our destination, a sense of isolation settling over us like a cloak. "We'll set up a base camp here," Carlos said, his voice steady. "From there, we can coordinate our search." The teams fanned out, each taking a sector of the dense forest to investigate. Our senses were heightened, every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves sending adrenaline coursing through our veins. Hours turned into days as we combed through the wilderness, searching for any clue that could lead us to the truth. On the third night, Miguel's team made a chilling discovery, a makeshift campsite deep in the heart of the forest. Tattered tents and scattered belongings hinted at a hasty departure, but there was no sign of the campers themselves. "Looks like they left in a hurry," Miguel observed, scanning the area with a flashlight. Carlos crouched down to examine the belongings, his brow furrowed in thought. "They were definitely here recently. We need to find out what drove them away." As we continued our search, tension hung heavy in the air. Strange noises echoed through the trees, whispers on the edge of perception. I could feel eyes watching us from the shadows, a sense of being hunted that sent shivers down my spine. And then we heard it, a low, mournful cry that echoed through the darkness. We exchanged wary glances, our hands tightening on our weapons. The cry came again, closer this time, carrying a sense of despair that chilled us to the bone. "It's coming from over there," Eleanor whispered, pointing towards a thicket of trees. We moved cautiously towards the source of the sound, our senses on high alert. The forest seemed to hold its breath as we approached, the air thick with tension. And then we saw it, a figure huddled on the ground, trembling with fear. "Are you all right?" Carlos called out, his voice gentle yet commanding. The figure looked up, eyes wide with terror. "They took him," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The lights." "They took him." Carlos exchanged a glance with Miguel, his expression grave. "Who took him? What did you see?" The woman shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "They came from the sky. Lights. Bright lights. They took him. My husband." We exchanged worried looks, the pieces of the puzzle starting to come together. Whatever was happening in these woods was far beyond our understanding, a phenomenon that defied logic and reason. "We need to get her to safety," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Carlos nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Agreed. Miguel, get a stretcher. Elena, stay with her." As we prepared to evacuate the woman from the forest, a sense of unease settled over us. We were stepping into a realm of unknown dangers, where reality blurred and the supernatural loomed large. But we were determined to uncover the truth no matter the cost. Back at base camp, we tended to the shaken woman, offering her warmth and reassurance. She recounted her harrowing experience, bright lights descending from the sky, enveloping her husband in a blinding glow before he vanished without a trace. "It was like they knew," she whispered, her hands trembling. "They knew we were there." Her account sent a chill down my spine. It echoed the reports we had received: strange lights, inexplicable disappearances, a sense of being watched from above. But who or what could be behind these phenomena? "We need to investigate further," Carlos said firmly, his eyes narrowing with determination. "Find out what happened to her husband and uncover the source of these lights." We set out at first light, following the woman's directions to the spot where her husband had vanished. The forest was eerily silent as we approached, the air heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. It felt as though we were intruding on sacred ground, where unseen eyes watched our every move. "There," Miguel said quietly, pointing to a clearing ahead. We cautiously entered the clearing, scanning the ground for any sign of disturbance. And then we saw it. Strange markings etched into the earth, glowing faintly in the morning light. They formed intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. "What are these?" Elena wondered aloud, crouching down to examine the markings. Carlos studied them thoughtfully, his brow furrowed in concentration. "They look ancient, like something out of a myth." As we examined the markings, a low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing moment. The ground beneath us trembled, sending shockwaves through our bodies. And then, with a blinding flash of light, they appeared, beings unlike anything we had ever seen. They stood before us, tall and slender, their forms shimmering with a celestial glow. Their faces were serene, their eyes pools of infinite wisdom. I felt a surge of awe and fear, a primal instinct that told me we were in the presence of something beyond human comprehension. "We mean you no harm," Carlos called out, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. One of the beings stepped forward, its gaze fixed on Carlos with an intensity that made my heart race. It spoke, its voice echoing in our minds with a clarity that transcended language. "We are the Guardians," it said, its words reverberating through our consciousness. "We watch over this world, protecting it from forces beyond your understanding." Carlos exchanged a glance with me, his expression unreadable. "What about the disappearances? The lights?" The Guardian nodded solemnly. "We sensed a disturbance, a tear in the fabric of reality. Your world and ours are connected, intertwined in ways you cannot yet comprehend." It explained that the bright lights were anomalies caused by the convergence of dimensions, a rift that allowed beings to pass through from one realm to another. The disappearances were unintended consequences, individuals caught in the flux between worlds. "We mean no harm," the Guardian reiterated, its voice filled with compassion. "But your world is in danger. Forces seek to exploit these rifts, to unleash chaos upon your world." Carlos nodded, absorbing the information with a sense of gravity. "How can we stop it?" The Guardians exchanged a silent conversation among themselves, their forms shimmering with a collective energy. Finally, the first Guardian spoke again. "You must seal the rifts," it said. "Restore the balance between your world and ours. Only then can the threat be contained." Armed with newfound knowledge, we returned to base camp to formulate a plan. The Guardian's revelation had opened our eyes to a world of possibilities and dangers that we had never imagined. Our mission now had a clear objective: to locate and seal the rifts before they could unleash further havoc. "We need to map out the rift locations," Carlos said, spreading a map on the table. "Based on the Guardian's information, they should follow a pattern." Miguel nodded, his fingers tracing the lines on the map. "If we can pinpoint the areas with the highest concentration of anomalies, we can prioritize our efforts," Elena chimed in, her voice filled with determination. "And we'll need to gather supplies, equipment to seal the rifts once we find them." Over the following days, we worked tirelessly to gather information and prepare for our next phase of the mission. Reports came in from other Task Force X teams, each encountering their own challenges and revelations. The scope of the phenomenon was staggering, spanning continents and cultures. "We're not alone in this," Carlos remarked one evening as we reviewed the latest data. "There are others out there fighting the same battle." I nodded, a sense of camaraderie settling over us. We were part of something bigger than ourselves, a global effort to protect humanity from threats that defied conventional explanation. As we prepared to set out on our next mission, a sense of urgency gripped us. The rifts posed a clear and present danger, their existence threatening to unravel the fabric of reality itself. But with each challenge we faced, we grew stronger, more determined to succeed. "We leave at dawn," Carlos announced, his voice carrying the weight of our collective resolve. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we make a difference." The sun beat down mercilessly as we ventured deeper into the desert, the relentless heat testing our endurance. Each step kicked up plumes of fine sand that shimmered in the sunlight before settling back to the ground. The vast expanse seemed untouched by time, a testament to nature's raw power and indifference. Navigating by GPS coordinates, we trekked towards the heart of anomaly. Sightings. Reports had painted a picture of strange phenomena, lights dancing in the night sky, eerie sounds drifting through the dunes, and whispers of beings unseen. The desert held secrets that defied rational explanation, and we were determined to unravel them. "There," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible above the desert breeze. In the distance, a faint shimmer caught our eyes, a distortion in the air that wavered like a mirage. As we drew closer, the anomaly revealed itself, a swirling vortex of energy, casting a subtle, ethereal light onto the surrounding sand. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the desert itself. "This is it," Miguel confirmed, his tone serious as he scanned the area for any signs of danger. Carlos nodded, his expression focused. "Let's proceed with caution. We don't know what we're dealing with here." Setting up a perimeter, we prepared for the delicate task ahead. The equipment we had brought, a combination of high-tech sensors and ancient artifacts acquired from occult specialists, was our arsenal against the unknown. "We need to seal this rift before anything else slips through," Carlos said, his voice cutting through the desert silence. With practiced precision, we initiated the sealing ritual, guided by the knowledge passed down from the Guardians. Each step was meticulous, our movements deliberate as we formed a protective circle around the anomaly. The air hummed with energy, charged with the anticipation of what lay beyond the shimmering veil. As we chanted ancient incantations and focused our collective willpower, the rift responded. The swirling vortex began to fluctuate, its energy intensifying as if in defiance of our efforts. The desert wind picked up, carrying with it whispers that seemed to echo from another realm. "We're losing control," Elena warned, her voice strained with effort, but we pressed on, drawing strength from our unity and determination. Beads of sweat glistened on our brows as we channeled our energy into the final stages of the ritual. The rift pulsed erratically, pushing back against our efforts with a ferocity that tested our resolve. And then, with a surge of combined willpower, we activated the ancient artifact, a relic said to have been blessed by the Guardians themselves. A blinding flash of light erupted from the rift, illuminating the desert landscape in stark relief. The energy vortex shuddered, then collapsed in on itself with a deafening roar. Silence descended over the desert once more, broken only by the sound of our labored breaths. We stood in awe and exhaustion, the remnants of the rift dissipating into the desert air like smoke. "We did it," Miguel said, his voice tinged with disbelief and relief. Carlos nodded, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "One down, but there are still more out there." As we gathered our equipment and prepared to leave, a sense of accomplishment mingled with the knowledge that our mission was far from over. The desert held many secrets, and we had only scratched the surface of the mysteries it contained. "Let's report back to base camp," Carlos said, his voice steady with resolve. "We need to debrief and prepare for the next anomaly." And so, under the watchful gaze of the desert sun, Task Force X turned towards home, knowing that their journey into the unknown had only just begun. As we approached the designated coordinates in the desert, the air seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy. The landscape around us was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft crunch of sand beneath our boots. According to our intel, this area was a hotspot for rift activity, a place where the fabric of reality thinned, allowing beings from other dimensions to slip through. "Keep your eyes peeled," Carlos advised, scanning the horizon with a pair of binoculars. "We don't know what we might encounter." We moved cautiously through the desert, the sun beating down relentlessly. Sweat trickled down my back as we advanced, the tension thickening with each step. The desert seemed to stretch on forever, an endless expanse of sand and sky. "There," Elena whispered, pointing towards a distant rock formation. A faint shimmering could be seen, like heat rising from a sun-baked surface. As we approached, the shimmer grew more pronounced, forming a swirling vortex of energy that pulsed with an unearthly glow. "It's definitely a rift," Miguel confirmed, his voice tinged with awe. We gathered around the rift, observing it cautiously. The energy emanating from the portal was palpable, a doorway to another realm that defied comprehension. I felt a mixture of fear and fascination, wondering what lay beyond the swirling maelstrom. "We need to seal it," Carlos said firmly, breaking the silence. Miguel nodded, unpacking the equipment we had brought for this purpose. We set to work, following a procedure outlined by the Guardians, a ritual that involved channeling our collective energy to close the breach between worlds. The process was tense and laborious, each step critical to the success of our mission. We formed a circle around the rift, focusing our thoughts and intentions on restoring balance. The air hummed with energy as we worked, our hands moving in synchrony to complete the ritual. And then, with a final surge of effort, we activated the sealing mechanism. A burst of light erupted from the rift, casting shadows across the sand. We held our breath as the energy vortex wavered, then slowly began to dissipate. "It's working," Elena said, relief evident in her voice. The rift collapsed in on itself, shrinking until it disappeared entirely. The desert fell silent once more, the only evidence of the rift's existence, a faint residual energy in the air. "We did it," I breathed, a sense of accomplishment washing over me. Carlos clapped me on the shoulder, a rare smile gracing his features. One down, many more to go. As we packed up our equipment and prepared to move on, a sense of optimism filled the air. We had proven that the rifts could be sealed, that we had the power to protect our world from supernatural threats. But our mission was far from over. There were still more rifts to find and seal, more challenges to overcome. "We should report back," Miguel suggested, glancing at the setting sun. Carlos nodded in agreement. "Let's head back to base camp. We'll debrief and plan our next move." The journey back was filled with a quiet satisfaction. Our spirits, buoyed by our success. The desert stretched out around us, bathed in the golden light of dusk. I reflected on everything we had experienced, the battles fought, the mysteries unraveled, and the bonds forged through adversity. As we approached base camp, the familiar faces of our comrades greeted us warmly. There was a sense of camaraderie among Task Force X, a shared purpose that united us in our mission to protect humanity. "We sealed a rift today," I announced to the group, unable to contain my pride. Cheers erupted around us, hands clapping me on the back in congratulations. But amidst the celebration, there was a sobering reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. Our victory in the desert was just the beginning, a glimpse into a world where reality and myth intertwined, where dangers lurked in the shadows. "Tomorrow," Carlos said, his voice cutting through the jubilation, "we find the next rift. And so, under the light of a desert moon, we rested, knowing that our journey was far from over." The following morning, we gathered once more in the briefing room to plan our next move. Our success in sealing the desert rift had bolstered our confidence, but we knew that each new encounter could bring unforeseen challenges. "We have reports of another anomaly," Carlos began, pointing to a map on the screen. This time in a dense forest region. The area was marked with clusters of red dots, indicating sightings and disturbances that hinted at rift activity. It was clear that the phenomenon was spreading, its reach extending into new territories. "We'll need to approach this cautiously," Miguel remarked, studying the map intently. "The forest is dense with limited visibility." Elena nodded in agreement. "We should be prepared for anything. The Guardians warned us that these rifts can attract other entities, not all of them friendly." Carlos grimaced, his expression troubled. "We can't afford to underestimate the risks. Our priority is to seal the rift and prevent any further incursions." With our plan in place, we set out for the forest region, our senses on high alert. The journey was filled with a tense anticipation, each rustle of leaves and distant creak of branches sending a jolt of adrenaline through us. "Stay together," Carlos advised, his voice low, "and keep your eyes and ears open." The forest enveloped us in a shroud of green and shadow, the air thick with the scent of earth and foliage. We moved cautiously through the undergrowth, following the trail of disturbances reported by local residents. "There," Elena whispered, pointing to a clearing ahead. A faint glow could be seen through the trees, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to echo in our bones. As we approached, the source of the disturbance became clear. A rift, similar to the one we had encountered in the desert, but with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "This one feels different," Miguel murmured, his brow furrowed with concern. Indeed, the energy emanating from the rift seemed more chaotic, swirling with a volatile intensity. It cast eerie shadows across the forest floor, distorting the natural world around it. "We need to seal it quickly," Carlos said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. We wasted no time in setting up our equipment, following the ritualistic procedure we had perfected. The air crackled with energy as we formed a circle around the rift, our hands glowing with a faint luminescence. But as we began the sealing process, a sense of unease settled over me. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the rustling of leaves falling silent. And then, from the depths of the rift, something emerged, a figure cloaked in darkness and shimmering with malevolent energy. "Look out!" Elena shouted, her voice filled with urgency. The entity lunged at us with startling speed, its form shifting and twisting as if defying the laws of physics. We scrambled to defend ourselves, weapons drawn and hearts pounding with adrenaline. "Keep it distracted," Carlos ordered, firing a volley of shots at the creature. Bullets seemed to pass through it harmlessly, as if it were made of smoke and shadow. I could feel the chill of its presence, a primal fear that rooted me to the spot. "We need to disrupt the rift," Miguel yelled, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Summoning every ounce of courage, I focused my energy on the ritual, blocking out the chaos around me. The rift pulsed with renewed intensity, threatening to consume us all in its maelstrom. And then, with a final surge of determination, we activated the sealing mechanism. The rift quivered, its energy faltering under the onslaught of our combined willpower. For a moment, it seemed as if we might succeed, but the entity fought back, its form contorting with rage. It lashed out with tendrils of darkness, striking at us with an otherworldly fury. "We can't hold it," Elena cried, her voice tinged with desperation. But just as all hope seemed lost, a voice echoed through the chaos, a familiar voice filled with wisdom and resolve. "Focus your minds," the Guardian's voice resonated within us. "You have the power to seal this breach." Drawing on the Guardian's guidance, we summoned our collective strength, pushing back against the entity's onslaught. With a final burst of effort, we closed the rift, sealing it off from our world. The forest fell silent once more, the entity's presence dissipating into the ether. We stood panting, chests heaving with exertion and relief. "We did it," I gasped, disbelief mingling with triumph. Carlos nodded, his expression grim. But at what cost? In the aftermath of the forest encounter, we regrouped at base camp, weary but victorious. The Guardian's warning echoed in our minds. The rifts were a symptom of a larger imbalance, a conflict that spanned dimensions. "We can't let our guard down," Carlos said solemnly, addressing the group. "There are still more rifts out there, more challenges to face." The events of our mission with Task Force X had opened our eyes to a world of mysteries and dangers that defied explanation. We had encountered beings beyond our understanding, fought battles on the edge of reality, and forged bonds that transcended mere camaraderie. "But we're not alone," Miguel said, his voice filled with conviction. "Together, we can make a difference." And so, our journey continued, a relentless pursuit of truth, justice, and the protection of humanity from supernatural threats. Each rift sealed was a victory, a step towards restoring balance and safeguarding our world. As the sun set over the horizon, casting long shadows across the camp, we gathered around a crackling fire, the warmth a comforting contrast to the cool night air. The events of the day weighed heavily on our minds, but there was also a sense of solidarity among us, a shared determination to press on, no matter the challenges ahead. "We've proven that we can seal these rifts," Elena remarked, staring into the dancing flames. "But what if there are more out there that we haven't discovered yet?" Carlos nodded thoughtfully, his expression grave. "We need to be vigilant. The Guardians warned us that the rifts are symptoms of a larger conflict." Miguel glanced up at the starry sky, his eyes tracing the constellations overhead. "And what about the beings we encountered? The entity in the forest? It wasn't like anything I've ever seen." I shivered, recalling the creature's malevolent presence. "Whatever they are, they're not from our world, and they won't stop until they find a way through." Silence fell over the campfire as we contemplated the magnitude of our mission. The weight of responsibility hung heavy on our shoulders, each of us grappling with our own fears and doubts. "We have to stay focused," Carlos said finally, breaking the silence. "There's no room for hesitation or doubt." The others nodded in agreement, their expressions set with determination. We were a team forged in the crucible of adversity, bound by a common purpose that transcended personal sacrifice. "We'll rest tonight," Carlos decided, his voice firm, "but tomorrow we continue our search." And so, under the watchful gaze of the stars, we settled in for the night. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on the faces of my comrades. In the quiet moments before sleep claimed me, I reflected on everything we had experienced: the horrors, the triumphs, and the unyielding spirit that drove us forward. As dawn broke over the horizon, we set out once more, our resolve unshakable. The journey ahead would be fraught with peril and uncertainty, but we faced it together, a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of the unknown. "Our mission is far from over," Carlos declared, his voice carrying across the wilderness. "But as long as we stand united, there's nothing we can't overcome." And so, with courage in our hearts and purpose in our steps, Task Force X ventured forth into the unknown once more. The world awaited our protection, its fate intertwined with ours in a battle that spanned dimensions and defied comprehension.